Lena's fingers trembled slightly as she gripped her backpack strap, her eyes scanning the crowded airport for a familiar face. The hum of rolling luggage, the distant calls of announcements, and the chatter of families filled the large hall, but none of it could drown out the ache in her chest. She had been waiting for over an hour, standing beside Gate 14, and the truth was simple yet painful. Her mom had forgotten she was there. She pulled her phone out again, staring at the screen as if sheer willpower could make her mother appear. 12 missed calls. 12. Each one had been answered by the cold voice of voicemail, repeating the same robotic message over and over. "Please leave a message after the tone," Mom Lena whispered under her breath, though she knew it was useless. The trip back from school had been a mixture of excitement and nerves. Flying alone for the first time was a big deal, and she had pictured the moment she stepped out of the arrival gate, her mother's warm smile waiting a hug ready to erase the loneliness of the flight. But the reality she faced now was emptier than she had imagined. She sank onto a nearby bench, her backpack on her lap. Around her, children ran toward their parents, arms wide and smiles bright. The contrast was unbearable. She watched a little boy jump into his father's arms, his small feet dangling in the air. The father laughed, ruffling his son's hair. Lena blinked hard to keep the sting of tears away. Her mother had sent a text eventually, but the words only made her feel smaller. "Oh, I thought your flight was tomorrow." Lena stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the message, as if touching it could erase the hurt. She felt a strange mix of disbelief and emptiness. How could someone forget something so important? A daughter, returning from her first solo trip, standing alone in a sea of people, forgotten. It wasn't the first time. Lena had grown used to it, in a way. Birthday parties forgotten, school events missed, promises broken and brushed off with casual words like, "I'm just busy, sweetie." She had learned to swallow the disappointment and smile anyway, to cover the cracks with politeness. But tonight, at this airport, it felt different. The difference wasn't in the forgetting itself, it was in how it made her feel invisible at a moment when she needed to be seen. She tried calling again, one more time. Her fingers tapped the screen, pressing her mother's number with a nervous rhythm. The call went to voicemail. Lena exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion and anger settle in her chest. She felt alone, truly alone, and that realization made a cold fire spark inside her. Anger. Not tears, just a quiet, steady resolve. She stood and swung her backpack over one shoulder. There was no dramatic scream, no confrontation, no storming out. She simply walked toward the taxi stand, toward her own independence. She had learned over time that waiting for someone to change was a trap, a cycle that never ended. Tonight was just another proof. In the taxi, she let her eyes drift to the window, watching the city lights blur into streaks of orange and white. Her mother would eventually show up, she thought, panicked, but by then Lena would already be home, alone, safe. And that safety, she realized, was a small victory. At home, the house smelled the same as it always did, coffee, old books, and faint traces of her mother's perfume lingering in the air. Her mother was in the living room, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard. She barely looked up as Lena walked in. "Sorry about earlier," her mother said casually, glancing at her screen. "Work's been crazy." Lena nodded. No argument, no tears. She had learned that pleading for attention never worked. Trying to make her mother care only ended in disappointment. Tonight, she wouldn't ask. Tonight, she would let reality speak. She set her bag down quietly and went to her room. The door clicked softly behind her, and for the first time in a long while, she felt a small sense of power. She wasn't giving her mother the chance to dismiss her anymore. She didn't need to yell or cry to make her point. She just needed to stop being available on demand. As she unpacked her clothes, Lena thought about the 12 missed calls. She remembered the anticipation, the hope that her mother would answer one of them, the hope that someone would be waiting for her. That hope had been broken, but in that breaking, Lena felt a strange clarity. She didn't have to depend on anyone who consistently failed her. Over the next few days, Lena noticed how easily her life had adapted to her mother's negligence. She cooked her own meals, managed her own schedule, and handled the small but necessary responsibilities that no one else seemed to care about. It wasn't freedom yet, it was preparation. She was learning that relying on herself was safer than relying on anyone else. Her mother, busy as usual, didn't notice the subtle shift at first. She was used to Lena's presence, her quiet care, her constant attempts to smooth over cracks in the household. But Lena's sudden self-sufficiency created small gaps her mother couldn't ignore. Bills were filed late, minor household chores remained undone, and relatives began asking questions about Lena's distant behavior. When her mother finally asked, "Are you upset about the airport thing?" Lena smiled faintly, a calm, almost serene smile. "It's okay." "I handled it," she said softly. Those words hung in the air. They were simple, polite, but they carried the weight of an unspoken truth. Lena had stopped needing her mother's attention to survive. That realization hit her mother harder than any argument ever could. The next week, Lena started taking steps she hadn't before. She organized her own schoolwork without reminders. She managed her own schedule and handled minor errands independently. Each small act was a quiet protest, a way to reclaim the power her mother had overlooked for years. Lena wasn't being petty or mean. She was building herself, brick by brick, in a house where she had long felt invisible. Evenings became a time of reflection for Lena. She would sit by her window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about how small moments of neglect had shaped her. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. She was methodical. She understood now that the world was not guaranteed to pay attention to her needs, and that she could not rely on others to provide validation, and so the plan started forming in her mind. Not a plan of destruction, but a plan of quiet independence. She would not demand attention. She would not wait for apologies. She would simply exist in her own life, moving forward without relying on anyone who had failed her. One evening, her mother peeked into her room. "Lena, dinner's ready," she called. "I'm not hungry," Lena replied calmly. Her mother frowned but did not insist. That simple act of self-reliance marked a turning point. Lena realized that power did not always come from loud confrontation or dramatic revenge. Sometimes it came from absence, from the choice to step back, to exist independently, to let someone realize your value only when they can no longer take it for granted. That night, Lena lay in bed. Thinking about the airport, she remembered the crowded hall, the faces of families reunited, the pang of loneliness that had driven her into a taxi. But instead of bitterness, she felt clarity. She had survived that moment alone. She had handled it with grace, and most importantly, she had learned something her mother would never understand unless she experienced it herself. Lena didn't need anyone to notice her to exist, to thrive, or to be whole. The next morning she woke up early, packed her school bag, and walked out of the room with a quiet sense of purpose. She didn't rush to her mother, didn't wait for approval or affection. She simply moved forward, step by step, day by day, building a life where she was not forgotten, where she was not invisible, where her worth did not depend on someone else's memory. Lena's quiet revenge had begun, not with anger, not with confrontation, but with the simple, powerful act of independence. She was no longer waiting at gate 14. She was moving forward in her own life, and in doing so, she was teaching her mother a lesson more profound than words could ever convey. And somewhere deep inside, a calm satisfaction settled over her. She had learned that the most lasting revenge isn't about making someone suffer. It's about showing them that you no longer need them to survive. The morning sunlight poured through the thin curtains of Lena's room, falling on the neat stack of school books she had arranged the night before. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the restless anxiety that usually accompanied mornings at home. She had learned that rushing to get her mother's approval or attention never changed anything. So she got up slowly, dressed herself, and prepared breakfast without calling out for anyone. Her mother, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open, barely glanced at her. "Good morning," she said, fingers still tapping the keys. "Did you sleep well?" "Yes," Lena replied, smiling politely, though a little distance had settled into her voice. That polite distance was deliberate. She wasn't cold, but she wasn't letting herself be needed in the way she had always been before. Her mother nodded absently, sipping coffee. Breakfast is on the table. Don't burn it, please." Lena laughed quietly, the sound calm and measured. She sat down, poured cereal into a bowl, and ate slowly. Her mother had always been preoccupied with work, emails, and messages. Lena had spent years adjusting her own life around her mother's priorities, but now something had shifted. She realized that caring too much for someone who consistently overlooked her needs only drained her. After school, Lena returned home with her backpack heavy with books. Normally, she would have run to her mother, eager to share stories about her day, to ask questions, to receive the little encouragement that was often missing. Today, she didn't. She placed her bag on the floor quietly, washed her hands, and went to her room. Her mother glanced up once and said, "Dinner will be in an hour." That was it. No concern, no follow-up, no question about her day. Lena had expected this and felt no disappointment. Instead, she felt a subtle sense of freedom. That evening, Lena decided to start a small project she had been putting off for months, organizing her personal schedule and learning to manage her time better. She created a detailed planner, listing homework assignments, extra reading, and even small personal goals like cooking a new recipe or practicing drawing. She included self-care routines and plans for short walks outside, things she had long ignored while catering to the household's constant small emergencies. Her mother noticed the change immediately. At dinner, she looked at the neatly arranged books on Lena's desk, the planner open beside them, and her brow furrowed. "When did you start doing all this?" she asked, a trace of uncertainty in her voice. "I just thought it would help me stay organized," Lena replied calmly. No apology, no explanation. Her tone was neutral, but there was a quiet confidence underneath it. Her mother frowned, but she didn't push further. She wasn't used to Lena taking initiative without being prompted or guided. That little act of independence was starting to unsettle her. Days passed, and Lena continued her quiet transformation. She began preparing her own meals, organizing her school materials without reminders, and managing small chores around the house. She no longer waited for her mother to notice or intervene. When her mother asked for help, Lena responded politely, but she stopped going out of her way to fix every problem or smooth over each oversight. Her mother's initial confusion soon turned into unease. Small things that had always been managed by Lena now went unchecked. A bill was late, an email wasn't sent, and even small family arrangements began to unravel. Relatives started calling, asking questions. "Is Lena okay? She seems distant." Her mother tried to address it, but the calm, self-sufficient demeanor Lena displayed made it hard to confront her directly. "Are you upset about the airport thing?" her mother asked one evening, attempting to reopen the conversation. "It's okay," Lena replied, her voice steady, her eyes calm. "I handled it." Those words hung in the air, heavier than she realized. They weren't harsh, they weren't spiteful. They were simple and true. Lena didn't need her mother to care to survive. That idea was sinking into her mother's mind like a quiet, persistent weight, slowly making her aware of all the times she had overlooked her daughter. Lena's strategy wasn't about making her mother suffer. It wasn't about revenge in the dramatic sense. It was about presence and absence, attention and withdrawal. She was showing her mother that neglect had consequences, not through anger, but through independence. Even at school, Lena began excelling quietly, taking on small projects and responsibilities without seeking validation at home. She joined the art club, where she could practice drawing and learn from peers, and volunteered to help younger students with tutoring. All of this made her feel capable and in control of her life. She no longer felt the need to report every success to her mother. Her mother noticed this too. One evening, she peeked into Lena's room while she was reading. "You never tell me anything anymore," she said softly. "I'm fine," Lena replied. Simple, calm, unshakable. Her mother's unease grew. She had never realized how much she had relied on Lena to maintain the household harmony, to keep things running smoothly, to provide emotional labor without complaint. Lena's absence in these areas created a silent tension that her mother could not ignore. Weeks passed, and Lena's independence became more evident. She began making small decisions without consulting her mother, choosing her own clothes for school, deciding which extracurricular activities to attend, and even managing her own pocket money. She was polite, cooperative, and respectful, but the subtle distance she maintained was unmistakable. Her mother tried to reach out, occasionally offering help or advice, but Lena politely declined. "I've got it," she would say with a calm smile. And in that smile was the quiet truth: Lena didn't need her mother anymore. Her mother began to realize slowly that she had created this situation herself. Years of forgetfulness, of distraction, of taking her daughter's presence for granted had built a gap that couldn't be closed overnight. Lena's quiet independence was a reflection of that gap. One afternoon, Lena came home with news that surprised even her mother. She had applied for a scholarship program in another city. Her mother had no idea. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, panic creeping into her voice. "I thought you wouldn't remember," Lena said simply. The words cut deep, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. Her mother realized with a sinking feeling that she had lost control, not through rebellion or conflict, but through her own inattention. Lena had become her own person, capable of making decisions and taking action independently. This was the essence of Lena's quiet revenge. She wasn't lashing out. She wasn't yelling or punishing. She was simply stepping back, letting her mother see the consequences of neglect, and proving through action that she could thrive on her own. Her mother watched as Lena continued to grow into her independence. She cooked meals, organized her schoolwork, and managed responsibilities without complaint. She laughed and talked with friends, developed hobbies, and began planning for her future. And every time her mother looked at her, she saw someone who had grown beyond the boundaries her neglect had once imposed. One evening, Lena's mother tried to initiate a conversation. "Do you want to go out for dinner this weekend?" "Just us?" "I'll think about it," Lena said calmly. Her tone was polite, but non-committal. She didn't need permission to make her own choices, and she wasn't offering it either. Her mother felt a pang of realization. She had forgotten, countless times, that Lena had her own mind, her own plans, and her own life. Now, faced with her daughter's quiet self-sufficiency, she began to understand that neglect had lasting consequences. Lena's days became structured and intentional. She managed her schoolwork efficiently, pursued personal interests, and gradually began to take small steps toward long-term independence. She wasn't seeking revenge in the traditional sense, but in the quietest, most powerful way possible. She was showing her mother that neglect was not without effect, that her daughter could thrive even without attention, and that the child she had overlooked was stronger than she had imagined. At night, Lena would sit by her window reflecting on the changes. She thought about the airport, the 12 missed calls, the moment she realized her mother had forgotten. She didn't feel bitterness anymore. She felt strength. She had learned that the world didn't have to notice her to be meaningful, and that she didn't have to wait for someone else to provide validation. Her quiet rebellion, her deliberate independence was beginning to take root in her mother's consciousness. The absence of reliance, the calm self-sufficiency, and the careful distance Lena maintained were shaping a subtle, unavoidable lesson: attention and care, when withheld, could not be replaced once earned elsewhere. By now, Lena had mastered the art of quiet power. She wasn't angry, she wasn't vindictive, and she didn't need drama. Her revenge, if it could even be called that, was in living fully, unbound and unshaken by the neglect she had endured. Her mother's realization was growing day by day with each small independent choice Lena made. And so, as Part 2 closes, Lena sat at her desk, finishing a drawing she had started weeks ago, her mother's gaze occasionally flicking toward her from the living room. The air between them was calm, but charged with unspoken understanding. Lena's journey of quiet, thoughtful independence was well underway, and her mother could only watch, slowly learning the cost of forgetfulness and the power of a child who learned to survive without being seen. The house felt quieter than usual. Lena sat at her desk, her hands carefully organizing her school notes, while her mother hovered in the kitchen, glancing at her occasionally from the corner of her eye. Something in the air had changed. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was subtle, almost invisible, but Lena could feel it. Her mother, once the center of her world, now seemed uncertain. Each day, the calm confidence Lena radiated reminded her mother of how often she had overlooked her. And now she was seeing the results. It started with small things: a phone bill left unpaid, an online school, form forgotten. A message from a relative asking why Lena hadn't replied. Each of these moments would have been smoothed over by Lena in the past, but now she politely let them stand. No intervention. No explanation. She simply continued with her own schedule, calmly managing her life without asking for or needing permission. Her mother noticed the consequences immediately. The first time a bill was late, she panicked. "Lena, why wasn't this paid?" she exclaimed, her voice higher than usual. "I thought it was scheduled automatically," Lena said softly, her tone neutral, almost serene. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't make excuses. She simply stated the truth. Her mother stared at her, realizing for the first time that Lena had stopped covering for her mistakes. Each small failure in the household reminded her of years she had ignored, of the countless times Lena had been the one to fix things quietly, silently, without expecting gratitude. Now, the roles had shifted, and it was disorienting. At school, Lena continued to thrive independently. She joined a study group, volunteered to help peers, and even started preparing for a scholarship that would take her to another city after graduation. None of this was announced at home. She didn't need her mother's approval anymore, and that realization weighed on her mother like a stone. One evening, her mother tried to initiate a casual conversation. "Lena, are you planning to join the art club next semester?" "I already signed up," Lena replied, flipping through her sketchbook. She smiled politely but didn't wait for approval. Her words were calm, factual. There was no need to argue or prove herself. She was simply living her life. Her mother's face fell. The realization hit her. Lena didn't need her permission. She didn't need her guidance. Lena had grown beyond her oversight. The tension in the household escalated slowly, in subtle ways. Her mother started noticing how independent Lena had become. She cooked her own meals, managed her schoolwork efficiently, and handled responsibilities that once relied on her mother's guidance. Relatives began to notice, too. She seemed so mature. One aunt remarked over a video call, "I don't remember you being like this when you were her age." Lena's mother felt a twinge of guilt. She had spent so much time being busy, distracted, or forgetting important things that she had overlooked her daughter's growth. One afternoon, her mother came into Lena's room, hesitant. "Lena, you've changed." "I didn't realize. I see it now. You're more independent." Lena looked up from her sketchbook. Her expression was calm, her eyes steady. "I've always been capable," she said softly. "I just didn't always need to prove it." Her mother blinked. That sentence echoed in her mind. She realized that neglect didn't just affect feelings, it shaped growth. Lena had learned to survive without reliance on her, and now she was thriving. The quiet tension reached its peak when Lena casually mentioned that she had applied for a scholarship program in another city. Her mother's face turned pale. "Wait, what scholarship?" "I didn't tell you because I didn't think you'd remember," Lena said, a small polite smile touching her lips. She wasn't mocking, she was simply stating a fact. The truth hit her mother harder than she expected. She had taken Lena for granted for years, assuming she would always be there to manage things, to care for the household, to navigate life with a safety net her mother provided, or neglected to provide. Now Lena was proving that she didn't need that safety net anymore. Her mother felt a mixture of panic and regret. She tried to ask questions, to get involved, but Lena's calm independence made it difficult. Each answer was polite, precise, and final. She had learned that arguing or pleading achieved nothing. Instead, she lived her life deliberately, letting her mother understand the consequences through observation, not confrontation. The house began to feel smaller for her mother, not physically, but emotionally. Every day she noticed Lena handling more responsibilities, making more decisions, and asserting her own priorities. Simple things, a decision about what to wear, what activities to pursue, how to manage time, became reminders that Lena's world did not revolve around her mother anymore. Her mother tried to compensate, offering help or guidance, but Lena politely declined each time. "I've got it," she would say, her voice calm, steady. Her mother realized with a sinking feeling that she had created this situation herself. Years of distraction, forgetfulness, and inattention had led to this quiet, undeniable independence. Even small gestures that once would have delighted her mother now carried weight. When Lena prepared a meal, her mother noticed not just the act, but the skill and self-reliance behind it. When Lena managed her own schedule, her mother realized that every step forward was a step taken without her. The subtle consequences continued to mount. Invitations to relatives, requests for household assistance, and school responsibilities all became opportunities for Lena to demonstrate her autonomy. She handled each situation calmly, politely, and independently. And with every decision she made without involving her mother, the realization grew. Lena had become her own person. One evening, Lena's mother tried a different approach. She invited Lena to a weekend outing, hoping to reconnect. "Just us," she said softly. "We can catch up, talk, I'll think about it," Lena replied, her tone calm but measured. She wasn't refusing, but she wasn't agreeing either. Her words carried a quiet truth. She would no longer let her mother dictate her choices or demand her attention. Her mother felt the weight of the absence more acutely than she expected. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud. It was the quiet reality that Lena's life no longer required her involvement. She had been left behind not through neglect today, but through years of small omissions, forgotten promises, and overlooked needs. Lena's independence was the culmination of all those moments. The tension became more pronounced over time. Her mother began noticing how much Lena had grown beyond what she had imagined. She had developed skills, interests, and a calm confidence that had nothing to do with parental oversight. She cooked, studied, managed responsibilities, and pursued personal goals, all quietly, deliberately, and without asking for approval. One evening, as Lena worked on her scholarship essay, her mother hovered near the doorway. "Lena, are you sure you don't need help?" "I'm fine," Lena said softly, her eyes focused on her work. "Thank you, but I've got it." The calmness of that response carried more weight than any argument could. Her mother realized that this wasn't about rebellion or defiance. Lena wasn't angry. She wasn't lashing out. She was simply demonstrating that she could manage her life independently and that her mother's attention was no longer required for her survival. Her mother began reflecting on the past. She remembered the airport, the 12 missed calls, the disappointment she had caused. She realized that neglect wasn't a harmless act. It shaped the person who had endured it. Lena had learned self-reliance not out of defiance, but out of necessity. And now that self-reliance had grown into quiet, undeniable strength. This realization struck deeply. Her mother tried to reconnect, but Lena's responses remained calm, polite, and self-sufficient. There was no room for drama. There was no opportunity for guilt to be immediately alleviated. The consequences of years of neglect were now unavoidable, visible in the independence of the daughter she had once overlooked. By the end of the week, Lena's mother was acutely aware of the quiet lesson unfolding before her. Each act of self-sufficiency, each decision made independently, and each polite refusal of involvement reminded her that Lena no longer relied on her for direction, attention, or validation. The realization was powerful, even painful. Lena had learned to live without her, and in doing so, had created a life her mother could no longer control. The quiet revenge, as Lena had intended, was taking effect. It wasn't anger, confrontation, or punishment. It was the subtle, undeniable demonstration of independence. Her mother could see it every day, in every decision, every achievement, every calm response. Lena had grown beyond the need for constant reassurance, constant attention, or constant involvement. She had become her own person, and for Lena, that was enough. She didn't need drama, conflict, or harsh words. She simply needed to live, quietly, deliberately, and fully, showing her mother the value of attention, care, and presence, not through confrontation, but through calm, consistent independence. Graduation day arrived with a gentle sun spilling over the school courtyard. The air was filled with laughter, chatter, and the low hum of excitement. Students dressed in crisp gowns and caps moved in clusters. Families crowded the sidelines, cameras flashed, and pride and joy buzzed like electricity in the air. Lena stood among her classmates, a small, calm smile on her lips. She wasn't nervous. She wasn't anxious. She had always imagined this day as one of triumph, but now it carried something more subtle, quiet satisfaction. She had made it through the years without needing constant attention, without relying on someone who repeatedly failed her, and today she was standing tall. Her mother was in the crowd early, holding a bouquet of flowers. Her hair was slightly messy, her eyes red from what Lena guessed was a restless night. There was a nervous energy about her, the kind that comes from realizing you have been absent when it mattered most. Her mother scanned the graduates, searching, until her gaze landed on Lena. The moment their eyes met, Lena held her mother's look calmly. She didn't rush into her arms. She didn't smile wider to comfort her. She simply acknowledged her presence with a polite nod and continued to wait for the ceremony to progress. The small, controlled pause carried a weight far heavier than any hug could convey. The speeches ended. Names were called. Students lined up to receive diplomas. When Lena's name was called, she walked across the stage with confidence. She shook hands with the principal, accepted her diploma, and turned toward her mother. Her mother's hands shook as she offered the flowers. I'm so proud of you, she said, her voice quivering. Lena took the bouquet, her hands steady. She smiled, gentle, controlled, and kind. But there was a calm distance in her eyes that made her mother realize just how far her daughter had grown. "Thank you," she said softly. For the first time, her mother truly looked at her, not as a dependent child, not as someone she could guide or control, but as a young woman fully capable of living her own life. And the realization hit her like a shockwave. She had been absent when it mattered most. The airport, the 12 missed calls, the countless forgotten moments, it all led to this. Lena had learned to survive, to thrive, and to succeed without her. After the ceremony, they walked home together, side by side. Her mother tried to start a conversation asking about her plans, her scholarship applications, and her dreams for the future. Lena answered politely, calmly, but she didn't rely on her mother for approval or validation. She explained her scholarship, the city she hoped to move to, and the steps she had already taken to ensure her independence. Her mother listened, stunned. Each plan Lena described was a step taken without her guidance, without her involvement, without her oversight. And yet it was brilliant, deliberate, and complete. She realized that Lena's quiet independence was more powerful than any dramatic confrontation could have been. This was the real revenge. Lena had built a life her mother could no longer influence, a life her mother had not paid attention to, and a life she would continue to grow in, with or without her. That evening they sat at the dinner table, the house unusually silent except for the soft clinking of silverware. Her mother tried to ask more questions, hoping to bridge the gap that had grown over the years. Lena responded politely but carefully, never giving more than necessary. Her mother realized that this calm, measured distance was deliberate. It wasn't cruelty. It wasn't rebellion. It was a lesson learned from years of neglect. Her mother finally spoke softly, almost as if confessing a long-hidden truth. "I'm sorry, Lena. I know I wasn't all there. I forgot things, missed things, and I should have been better. I didn't mean to hurt you." Lena paused, considering her words. She wasn't angry. She wasn't seeking revenge through harshness, but she understood the power of presence, absence, and recognition. "I know," she said gently. "I understand. And it's okay. I've learned to manage without needing it." Her mother's eyes filled with tears. This was the moment she realized the depth of her neglect. Not just the forgotten airport, not just the missed calls, but all the years of subtle inattention, of distraction, of assuming her daughter would always adjust and forgive. Lena had grown stronger because of it, not weaker, and that strength now shone in front of her like a quiet, undeniable truth. Over the next few weeks, Lena continued to prepare for her scholarship move. She arranged for housing, researched the city, and planned her finances. Each step was deliberate, each decision independent. Her mother tried to involve herself, asking questions, offering advice, but Lena's responses remained calm, polite, and firm. She didn't need her mother to take the lead, and she didn't allow her mother to take control. The subtle tension in the household had reached its peak. Her mother felt the cost of her past neglect in every glance, every decision, every polite refusal. She wanted to be part of Lena's life, to reconnect, but she realized that Lena's independence was a shield as much as it was growth. It wasn't defiance, it was survival, self-respect, and empowerment. One night, her mother came into Lena's room while she was packing her scholarship documents. "Do you think maybe we can spend more time together before you leave?" she asked tentatively. And Lena looked up, her expression calm, gentle, and thoughtful. She considered the words carefully before replying. "I'd like that," she said, smiling softly, "but only if it's real, if it's meaningful." Her mother nodded, understanding the weight of that sentence. She realized that reconciliation wouldn't come from words alone. It would come from presence, consistent attention, and respect for the independence Lena had earned through years of quiet resilience. The days leading up to Lena's departure were filled with careful planning, packing, and reflection. Lena prepared meals for herself, organized her things, and even helped her mother tidy up the house. Each act was deliberate, polite, and independent. Her mother noticed, quietly observing how capable her daughter had become. On the morning of her departure, Lena stood at the front door, luggage ready, her mother standing beside her with a mixture of pride and guilt in her eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said softly, her voice trembling, "and I'm sorry, truly." "Thank you," she said. "I've learned a lot, and I'll be okay. But I hope you've learned too." Her mother nodded, tears falling silently. She had learned finally that neglect has consequences. She had learned that her daughter's independence was a direct result of the gaps she had created, and she had learned that sometimes the quietest lessons were the most powerful. As Lena stepped into the taxi that would take her to the airport, she looked back once. Her mother stood in the doorway, a small figure in the sunlight, watching her. Lena's heart felt full, not with anger, not with revenge, but with satisfaction. She had survived the neglect. She had grown beyond it. She had built a life that her mother could no longer influence entirely. The taxi pulled away, and Lena felt a calm sense of power. She wasn't seeking punishment or revenge. Her success, her independence, her confidence, they were the proof that she no longer needed to be constantly remembered to exist fully. That, she realized, was the quietest, most effective form of revenge. Living well, freely, and on her own terms. Her mother watched the taxi disappear around the corner. She felt an emptiness, a hollow ache, but it was not anger toward Lena. It was the realization that she had missed so many moments, and now she could only hope to rebuild a meaningful connection while respecting the independence Lena had earned. Months later, Lena settled into her new city, her scholarship providing opportunities she had never dreamed of before. She made friends, explored the city, and built a routine that balanced academics, hobbies, and self-care. Every step she took reminded her of the strength she had gained from those years of quiet neglect, from the 12 missed calls, from the moment she realized she could exist without constant attention. Back home, her mother followed her updates through social media. She saw Lena laughing with friends, attending events, and achieving milestones. Each post carried a quiet lesson. Lena thrived, succeeded, and lived fully, without relying on her mother. And each post reminded her mother of the absence that had shaped such strength. In the end, the revenge was not loud or angry. It was calm, deliberate, and undeniable. Lena had not sought to hurt her mother. She had simply grown, thrived, and lived independently. Her mother understood, finally, that neglect leaves consequences that cannot be ignored, and that the most powerful lesson comes not from confrontation, but from the quiet strength of a child who learns to survive and flourish alone. And so Lena's story came full circle. She had stepped off the plane at the airport months ago, forgotten, alone, and hurt, but she had transformed that moment of pain into a life of strength, independence, and quiet triumph. She had shown without harsh words or anger that she was capable of living fully, freely, and beautifully, on her own terms. The quiet revenge was complete.